So, some behind the scenes from a podcaster creatives. Those who are close to us already know this, but I was recently having a conversation with my parents about the show. Shout out mom and dad, who are loyal listeners and watchers. And they said, how do you pick the topics for the show? And do you have like a spreadsheet? Like, how do you, decide what you're going to talk about each week? And I was like, yeah, we don't really do any of that. We just kind of show up, and whatever is on our mind is what the topic ends up being. And, as much as I'm typically the type of person who likes to plan and have a schedule, I feel like it's one of the things that makes our show work is that we don't feel like we have to go out and research something. We just kind of talk about, like what's on our heart or what's on our minds when we show up at the mic. And I think that it helps the show be a little bit more genuine.
Yeah. C's get degrees. So we I haven't opened up a spreadsheet in my life. We just roll up, crack our knuckles, and get started with it. And it had seemed to work for us. So, yeah.
So last week, I think if you listened to our last episode, I'm hopeful that you would have not known this, but we probably spent an hour before we started recording about like the actual episode trying to figure out what we were going to talk about. And we had a couple different ideas, and we even kind of like started to have a few little conversations, kind of like going down a few side roads before we hit that stride. But we had a moment last week where we were like, have we run out of things to talk about? And we're still not at our 100th episode yet, but we have been doing this now for almost 5 years.
Yeah.
So we thought that we would have a little reset going into this episode, but I think if this works out, something that would be fun to do, we're not going to commit to like how
somewhat regularly,
whenever we feel like it, but
right.
To kind of take the pressure off. I think last week you had mentioned a few different things, and I had mentioned a few little like small things, but we were like, could this be a full episode? So what we're going to do this week is just each sharing 3, or the number could change, things that we've found across the internet or that we've experienced in life that we think have worked well or that have impacted us, or something that we think that you might find interesting. And we're hopeful that this might also spark conversations with you. And, Steve doesn't love recommendations, but I would like to see what you are reading, listening to, watching, experiencing, and how it's, affecting you in your life and affecting you creatively.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, like,
be honest here.
Me.
Don't like.
No, I mean, like, I don't necessarily like when people come to me to say you need to watch this. No, I don't. I don't have to do anything. But like, I do like if you want to say like I'm watching this, I will listen, or I have consumed this, or I read this. I will listen and certainly be supportive of that. So yeah, 100%. Doesn't mean I'm going to go out and do it either, but I might. You never know. Like, I'm reminded of an old Letterman skit that he used to do back in the day where it was called "Is This Anything?" And basically they would have this like random thing that, activity or whatever, and he and Paul would debate, is this something? Is this anything? Is this nothing? And he'd be like, I think it's something. And Paul would be like, I don't think it's anything. So like this whole concept feels like an is this anything. So I think we need to ride it and just see what we got. But no, I'm excited to hear what you have to share, and definitely excited to hear what our listeners have to share. Definitely hit us up in the comments on the episode when it gets dropped with what you're seeing or what you're consuming or reading. Let's try to share some awesome stuff that we're involved with. So
this first video I saw on Twitter, and it came from Steve's team. And by the way, we'll link to all of these either in the show notes or in the notes on YouTube. A couple episodes ago, we were talking about the difference between, or maybe it was the last episode, the difference between kind of, following a script or following a format to get the information out, or creating something from more of a heart perspective with your audience in mind. And instead of saying, these are the things that we do to, communicate this message, it's, well, what's important to these people and what are they going to best respond to? And when I saw this video, I thought, you're nailing exactly that. This is a video that anyone watching it, they're immediately going to be engaged. They're immediately going to want to share it. It's impactful and it'll stay with you. So, Steve, since your team, and I know I'm making you kind of like share in this with me, but since
Give
it did
your answer,
since it did come from your team, do you want to give a little bit? Since I haven't really given a proper description of what's in this video, just kind of an overview of what it is.
Yeah. So we did this piece around Bus Driver Appreciation Day, which is a thing in education, and deservedly so. And I think what ends up getting challenging when you do these types of pieces, because there's so many appreciation days and weeks and whatever, for school professionals, for professionals in other industries too, it's hard for them to not all be the same. You want to be generic enough that everyone feels like you're the audience feels like you're taking care of everybody. But I think what I've learned over the years is that generic doesn't work in an industry that's built on individual relationships. It waters things down. If you have, I remember a long time ago, a buddy of mine who I've worked with for years would talk about support staff. So, bus drivers and custodians and, the front office workers and whatnot, they're superheroes in these districts. I mean, you could probably think back to your bus driver or custodian or somebody like that in your elementary school or whatever it is, and how much they were revered by students. They're superheroes. So, I don't like the term superhero because it's a weird thing. We attach these words like superheroes and wizards and whatever it is. And it's like, okay, like
you're not an MCU fan. It's fine.
Yeah, right. But they do have a really important role. So we wanted to make sure that in the creation of this, if we're going to do something around a specific purpose, we want to find the right front person to be, the heart to the bus drivers or, whatever group that we're looking to sort of recognize. So this particular piece around Bus Driver Appreciation Week, we were able to find, this one bus driver who had been with the district for a number of years and certainly had the personality to match, the amount of years that he was there, individual, handshakes and nicknames for all the kids. And we wanted to make sure that what we were showing was true to what the kids get to experience and see every day. Not necessarily like, here's this person who does a great job and we just wanted to highlight them and thank them. Like, we wanted to make sure the community felt like they knew what it was like for kids to interact with this person on a regular basis, because that's the unique part of the relationship. So we mic'd him up. Our lead creator on this project, Lindsay Quackenbush, who is one of the most amazing creative people that I get to work with on a regular basis. She's awesome. Went on a ride along with him, with the bus, went on 2 different routes, an elementary and a middle school route, and captured everything from when the kids get on to the funny little unique back and forth, dynamic and dialogue between the kids and the bus driver, the nicknames, the handshakes, stories, in between while the bus driver was driving the bus, just, obviously concentrating on the road, but remarking about, how kids that were on his first run when in his first year are now in high school, and God, he feels so old. But you got this arc from kids getting on the bus, the interactions, kind of the middle part of the video kind of centered in around some of his reflections and stories. And then a lot of it was just sort of the goodbyes and have a good day and here, let me zip your backpack up. And
that was my favorite part.
Yeah,
that was so cute.
Same here. All these little special moments that made you feel like you were there. It was recognizable content. I even love the piece where there's a part towards the end of the video where one of the kids that are on the bus gets off the bus, and the kid's little sibling is in the driveway, not old enough to go to school yet, but the bus driver knows the younger brother's name, says hi to the younger brother. It has this generational feel to it as well. So there's a lot of moments that really hit, I think, in that video. And I don't mean to steal your answer here. I'm not. I have my own. But
I'll butt in on one of yours. Don't worry.
But yeah, no, I hope so. But I agree. Like it just had that community feel that took this what can often be in many industries, not just schools, but generic celebrations for support staff, which just turn into Canva graphics. And it's not being critical of that, but like, I think this brings up a bigger debate point, and maybe this is for another episode down the line, but you're recognizing human beings who do really important work on a regular basis, and the outward facing representation in some cases is just a Canva graphic that says thank you and the name of that body. And I guess the debate is like, would you rather have just a generic, like, would you rather just have a presence to say that you did it, to say that it was meaningful, or would you rather invest the time, even if it's into one person? You're recognizing a whole body, but you're showing what it is like, through this individual relationship with that person. I know my answer is what we did. I'm confident in that. And I know sometimes resources don't always allow for that to be done. But if it's enough to recognize because you want to do it, it feels like it's something that you should look to invest the time into if possible.
There were kind of two things that stuck out to me. And the first was, I don't see a lot of school content unless it's something that you post, but I feel like any school content that pops into my feed is usually something bad. It's usually like when there's like a school shooting. So
yeah,
in my social feeds and in my news, those are the only things that are coming to the surface. I'm not seeing anything positive that's coming out of things that are happening at school. And, I get that, that's how media works. Tragedies get eyeballs, but
right.
We're missing out on, I feel like, most of the time it's great things that are happening in schools. And,
Sure.
It's really a shame that more stories like this are not rising to the surface. Like, why isn't that video viral? I mean, it definitely has that quality. When I watched it, I was like, I want to hang out with this bus driver. And
Yeah.
I think, I'm sure very purposely the way that it was crafted and filmed is like, you get the perspective of the kids, and it makes it, my memories of riding the school bus as a kid are not, super memorable. I mean, I kind of remember some of my bus drivers, but this video like makes you want to be a kid and ride the bus and get to interact with this amazing bus driver every day, because he makes it like a ride. It's an experience. Yeah. It's not just a way of getting from school to your house and vice versa. And the other thing that I was thinking was, like, not only did I want to be a kid riding that bus, but I was hopeful that in elevating the excellence of this bus driver, that other bus drivers might see this video and think, wow, I could be making this kind of impact. And maybe that would kind of like encourage them to do their job at the level of excellence as the individual who's highlighted in your video.
I'm gonna volunteer my first one here, and it's funny that this is the first one that I'm going to share. Because it very much was a focal point for an episode a couple of months ago for us, at least the brand. It's a graphic that was a video build, basically piece of content that was shared by Amtrak. So
wow,
you'll remember
you've become like this Uber Amtrak fan. Have you ever ridden on Amtrak?
I've been on a train. Yeah, I've been on a train before. Old world traveler that you are. I've been on trains. This is not necessarily the most, I would say, like, memorable, maybe compared to the tweet that we talked about a few months back. But it's a really good, I would say, argue a beautiful piece of content, celebrating their birthday. And in essence, it's what ends up turning out to be a still graphic build, certainly done by hand. It's their 52nd birthday. What would you describe the visual as, or the medium as? It looks like it's all hand drawn, right? I mean, like, it's
yeah, it looks hand drawn, but almost like it makes me, the illustration style makes me think that it was done like on an iPad. Like, it has a very like painterly style to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like there's a modernness to it.
There's a modern feel to it because you have the outline of two fingers that would be spreading like you would on a phone to zoom in on a certain part of the image, and as the actual image zooms in, you get another element of a landscape of a train being a central part of whatever that is. It gets to be a little bit like repetitive and redundant, and you feel like you might kind of like have a seizure looking at it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm a little dizzy.
Yeah, but the creativeness of it, where you, like as the finger spreads and as you zoom in a little bit more, you see a train on a certain component of an American landscape, or you see a ticket taker grabbing a ticket, or you see a person laying on a bed in the train reading their book. It's just all of these elements of a train ride over the 50 years that Amtrak has been around, and I love the specific the nature of detail, from the support worker to the workers waiting for the train to arrive, to more of a modern day feel, to an ode to, or a nod to a train station. There's just some really beautiful elements of design and layout in this illustration that is breathtaking, and it was enough to like make me continue to watch it. And even though I think it's only like 12 seconds long or whatever it is, or 15 seconds long, it's enough to make you want to watch it over and over again, because you're looking at a different part of it every time. So just a really creative piece that I don't necessarily feel like it's something that can be easily, in my industry at least, replicated. So that always makes me like stop in awe, because you're like, this is pretty cool that the resources that and the creativity of their staff that they have on this is breathtaking. But enough to really stand out for me.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and part of me wants to describe it as simple, but if I said that, I feel like it's almost like insulting the person that created this, because there was obviously so much work that went into these illustrations and the animation of it. And this is kind of like a tactic that you can use to get more watch time on your videos, especially for things like shorts and reels and this style video that was posted on Twitter. But to have something that kind of loops, so you're kind of, the viewer is unaware of when something ends and then when it begins again. So I mean, when you sent this to me, I watched it 3 times before I realized, like, oh, I saw this already.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, there's so much detail in these illustrations that you want to keep watching it, so that you catch different things every time. So that was executed really well. Great find.
Thank you. I come prepared, Mr. and Mrs. Tropiano.
The responsible podcasters. All right, my next one, I'm gonna try to not lose it for this, but so I've never really been much of like a poetry person. I'm guessing you're not either.
No.
But my sister Laura writes poetry, or has started to in the last few years, and has kind of made me a little bit more like open to it and kind of like finding the beauty in it. So for whatever reason, this poet popped into my Twitter feed. So the account is Joseph Fasano, and his description is the host of Daily Poetry Thread, and he gives poetry prompts. So his kind of like thing is that he gives kind of these like boilerplate like poetry prompts that allows people to like fill in the blanks, kind of like Mad Libs style. So this first one that popped into my I mean, I've seen so many others since I started following him, so it was hard to kind of like pick. So I decided to just kind of like stick with the first one that I saw. They're all really, kind of like, when you read the stories behind them, very beautiful and heart-wrenching. So, and the reason that this first one caught my eye is because this is, I'll set up the beginning of this tweet. This is a screenshot of like an email that was sent to him. So it said, "Dear Mr. Fasano, I came across the poetry prompt you designed for little children to express themselves with poetry." So I think that he's also an educator. So that may have been kind of like where he started, starting to share these prompts. And this person goes on to say, I gave it to my 95-year-old mother who has been struggling to express herself through dementia. And that kind of caught my eye because my grandma, who passed away last year, had dementia late in life. And that kind of like caught my eye when I read that sentence. And then he goes on to kind of like share the poem that his mom wrote, or yeah, I guess technically wrote. So
Right.
he says, this is what she wrote. And for context, in parentheses, Peter is the name of my late father. So she says, my name is Dorothy. Today, I feel like the room where we get to play Scrabble forever. Sometimes I am a cactus. Sometimes I am my children. But always I am hopeful. I ask the world, where will I see Peter again? And the answer is the room where we get to play Scrabble forever. Sorry. I was like, should I read this or should I not? Because I'm definitely going to struggle through it. But it's so beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And I'll share, he has, Steve, I can see you being annoyed if you start following him because, I think that there's something about when you read something that's that, touching, it kind of starts to feel diluted because there's like,
Sure.
Another, recent one in his feed is like, here's someone from like a 16-year-old autistic child. So it's like a lot of, people in different points of life who have their own, stories and struggles. And it's just, between my sister starting to write poetry and finding this account, I was like, you kind of see the power in it and
Right.
like how impactful it can be and healing it can be for people going through things.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think the sharing of such rawness, but so unique unto the person who's speaking those words. I think that's what makes it so powerful. It's funny that you said the word hopeful, or she said the word hopeful, or used that word, because I snapped right back to, we used to have this magnet as kids, and it was this, rectangular magnet with a bunch of different faces on it. And the faces all had the description of the face underneath it. So happy, angry, mad, confused, whatever. And we had it for a very long time, and it just sort of hung on the fridge. And then there used to be another square magnet that would go over the top of it. Was open, so you could see the face under it and you could move it to how you were feeling that day. We never really used it for anything. It was always just there on the side of the fridge. And then I remember after my mom was diagnosed with cancer and things weren't going great in terms of the, some of the results that she was getting through her testing and whatnot. I was down there one weekend, and on the refrigerator was the magnet, and the square had been moved over the hopeful face. And it just stopped me in my tracks because I knew like she had done that, and that's how she was expressing herself in that moment. And I think there's, we use the word hopeful a lot, and we don't realize what it means to people who are really hanging on to that word, and that emotion, knowingly or not, when they really need to feel that way, so I think that was my connection to that piece that you read. And but I can see exactly how it moves someone to tears, because it's just a very open look at your inside feelings with something.
Yeah, and I think, kind of the part about seeing so many of these stories about, like people with dementia, people with autism, and like, little kids expressing themselves in these ways is that they're so like, we as adults at our ages are so like, I think, closed off to this kind of thing about like, really some of us more than others, like, sharing what we really think about things and like giving these like kind of honest, beautiful, like childlike, unfiltered like thoughts, and the fact that that's kind of what they're using to fill in their blanks in these poems. It's really beautiful to see that.
Yeah, that's using that medium to do that for something that is very childlike, but really attaching real feelings to it. You don't really think about that when you're doing Mad Libs as a kid in its own, in its own way, but doing it in this light, yeah, it's pretty special.
So I'm done with crying in this
Okay.
episode. But
My next one is going to make you laugh. So,
okay.
that's
Well,
good.
I was also going to ask, so he, right below that tweet, he gives the boilerplate for writing a poem. Do you want to, as a podcast, write a poem? And it can't
Yeah.
be sad. We has to be like
Our feelings. Yeah. No, how
Yeah,
would
yeah.
you shoot us? Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll do this and then we'll publish our poem. Who knew we were going to become poets on this episode?
Poets. Look at this. I'm updating my resume as we speak.
I'll be the scribe and we'll kind of go back and forth so this can be a collaborative thing.
Okay.
So the first line is my name is. So should we say our name is a podcast for creatives? Today, I feel like I don't know, I'm cold right now. So I'll say colds. I feel like a cold
Beer
floating
in the. I'm gonna go pool cooler.
pool cooler. Oh, I like this picture we're painting. Okay. Sometimes I am I'm going to say flamingo.
Sometimes I am a wet towel.
That sounds about right. A poem for summer. All right.
It's getting worse as we go through it.
Okay. But always I am sunshiny.
I ask the world, how can I make this better?
And the answer is a cold beer floating in a pool cooler. Here is our poem. Our name is a podcast for creatives. Today, we feel like a cold beer floating in the pool cooler. Sometimes we are a flamingo. Sometimes we are a wet towel. But always we are sunshiny. We ask the world, how can we make this better? And the answer is a cold beer floating in the pool cooler.
It's oddly deep. I wasn't expecting that when we did it disjointed, but then when I heard it, I'm like, this is really good.
All right,
Okay.
let's move on from
Let's
the
keep laughing
poetry,
here, 'cause
the
we're-
poetry
yeah,
slam.
We've we've turned this into a chuckle fest, which is good. So my next one that I saw just the other day actually comes from a content creator that's I think really taken the digital world by storm. His name is Nick Casano, and Nicky Cass, if you follow him on social, plays a lot of great characters from an Italian pizza shop owner to family members of his that are Italian, baseball coaches that he had from high school. A lot of different, and a lot of it speaks to me because of my family, my background, things that I've experienced being a baseball player in high school. So like all of these things are great. I saw one yesterday actually, where he impersonates a local home improvement gutter guy or power washing guy. The attention to detail in all of his impressions are incredible. But this one specifically, from the polo shirt and tight jeans and boots with the large gut, where the guy walks in and hi, I'm and enter whatever name in your hometown or in your area where your home improvement guy puts his name in. Been serving the community for X amount of years, and we do this and we do that, but it wasn't really the humor so much as in the line delivery, so much as the mannerisms. Towards the end of the commercial, there's there's the guarantee that always comes from these guys where if we don't do this, you're gonna get whatever. And you could tell whenever they do these animated mannerisms, it's in their heads before they're about to do it on camera because they want to get it right. So So if you watch him at the end of the commercial, after he gets through all of the generic footage that comes along with these, like knocking on the door and the homeowner opening it up and him reaching out and shaking the person's hand and them looking at the bill together and all of these things that we all know to these to be true, he gets to like the grand finale of the commercial where he's about to give you the guarantee. And you watch the hand that he's not going to point with start to tremble a little bit because he's getting the rhythm down. All of a sudden, like the hand just the elbow starts to wobble a little bit, and then he just turns into the point to the camera to end the ad. And I could not stop laughing at that part of it because it's like every car dealer, every home improvement person, painter, whatever it is, they all have that generic call to action at the end that like doesn't resonate or doesn't do anything in the grand scheme of things. But it is such a big part of the ad for them that you're almost laughing at that versus anything that they're saying. And I thought he nailed it perfectly. The accent, the phone number on the screen, which was like 1-800-call Guttas because it was, it's the Italian accent. So it's Guttas. Like, it's great. It's just so great. I'm a big fan of his. I love when a new video drops. I never miss one. So go look up Nicky Cass. He'll make you laugh. It's a great account.
Yeah. So I think you saw that I had already seen and liked that video.
I did, which was huge for me because I was like, she's going to know this one immediately. I'm not going to have to build it up that much.
Yeah, and you had recommended the account to me a while back. It's hysterical. I'm usually, when it comes to like that style of account where it's kind of like an impersonator, I feel like, and this is for everyone, I would guess, but you're either like you're all in on it because they nail it so perfectly, or you're like, I don't get this. This is not for me. And you have no interest in it. So I don't follow too many of those types of accounts, but the ones that I do follow are just, I'm obsessed with them. So it's funny that you focus so much on his mannerisms, his delivery, and he's great in every video that he posts. But the thing that was making me laugh so much is that he so nailed just the format of these types of like local commercials where the beginning starts off, he almost had like a sepia tone. Was I imagining that? Or he had the color was different in the beginning because they're highlighting like the problem that the customer might be having. Like he's going around, the customer is having, issues with, with leaking or,
gutter related
problem. There's a big problem and he's going to be the one to solve it. And clearly he's seen a lot of commercials like this because he nailed it. It was so spot on a parody of one of those commercials. And I don't have cable, so I haven't seen one of those in a long time. So I think I also loved it because it brought me back to childhood and seeing, because it does kind of have that very cheesy kind of, execution to it. I'm imagining that these local businesses don't have, big, creative teams like you have at work, film crews. So they have to do what they can, but it seems like they all do exactly the same thing.
His attention to detail is incredible, and the mannerisms. I know we don't want to go necessarily off course, but he does a restaurant owner, an Italian restaurant owner
That's
that I love
favorite.
too.
Yeah.
With the like the hand twitching when he's like holding it up like this, like it's just kind of like trembling. There's just so many nuances to things that you see that remind you of what you experienced growing up or what you still see today. And I think he's brilliant. So yeah, if you need a good laugh, go look up Nicky Cass. He'll make you laugh.
All right. My last one.
Down to the last one. Yeah.
My last one also has the potential to be emotional, but I feel like I've gotten it out of my system. This came from a newsletter from Gretchen Rubin, one of my favorite people. I listen to her podcast. I read her books. She's most known for writing the book, The Happiness Project. But every week she sends out this newsletter with 5 things that are making her happy that week. So I'm just going to read it verbatim because it's short. It says, I've seen every episode of The Office many times and realized that maybe I love it so much because one of its core themes is one of my own essential themes, which is there's a lot of beauty in ordinary things. Isn't that kind of the point? And that is the final line of the entire show. And she shares a screenshot of, with the text on like the closed captioning on the screen that says there's that line, the final line. But the shot is Michael hanging up the painting that Pam painted of the watercolor that Pam did of The Office. And I had to go back and like actually look for the clip because I think that I've only seen the finale of The Office once, and I think it was when it originally aired. You know, I hate watching final episodes of shows.
Yeah,
I usually
yeah.
skip them. But I went back and just, looked it up on YouTube and kind of just like watched the last minute. So it's Jim talking and Pam talking, and Pam is the one who delivers that line that there's a lot of beauty in ordinary things. Isn't that kind of the point? And the line prior to that, kind of like the context for that line, is that she says, I kind of thought it was weird that you chose to make a documentary about us, about our, boring little paper company. But she said, we're very ordinary, but, then going into the line, there's a lot of beauty in ordinary things. Isn't that kind of the point? And I loved that they were able to, even though Steve Carell only appeared very briefly in that episode, or maybe the one just, I think it was that episode, not the one before, that they felt like the visual that would best match that line from Pam would be him hearkening back to the shot of Michael hanging up her painting. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's also one of my own personal themes that I love, is just finding beauty everywhere we can. And I had forgotten that that's kind of how they ended the show.
Do you find that that's something that has come more to you as you've gotten older? Reason I ask is because, I think it's a simple statement that like you're more appreciative of things the older that you get, the little moments, but I certainly feel that way more now. And I guess that's just how everyone feels or experiences things. But I don't think it's a lesson you're meant to realize at a young age. I think you're meant to chase the bigger, the more, the wild, the crazy, because you're never going to land all of those. You're never going to get all of those. But when you eventually settle into wherever you are in life, you tend to look around and say, this is all right. Like, this is what I'm meant to be, and this is how I'm meant to live. And I'm happy with this. Do you find that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think so much of it comes from kind of the messages that we're fed, like as a society, as kids, that we're always kind of chasing these big kind of like accomplishments and milestones, whether it's like a personal milestone, like, you graduate and then, you get married and you have kids, or, professionally, like, winning awards, or, in today's age, like, reaching a milestone of, followers. But all of those things, I think so many people try to pursue them because they're talked about so much. But we don't really step back and say, like, yeah, but like, how is that going to change my day-to-day life? How is that going to make things better? And sometimes they do, because, they could lead to other great opportunities. But yeah, the older I've gotten, the more I've come to appreciate and recognize like what is actually important to me.
I think that's something that truthfully I've struggled with. And I'm getting better at, to be fair, but the difference between striving for happiness and looking for happiness versus contentment, and it's honestly something that I heard from someone that we look up to and admire, in Billy Joel, that he talked about, everyone is, we're brought up in our culture to look for happiness, and sometimes it's just not there, and when you don't get it, it kind of reminds me of the Summer and Highland Falls lyrics, which is, it's either sadness or euphoria. And it's like, but is that really, should those only be the two choices? And like, if we search for contentment in situations, it's a lot easier to sort of be happy because you're not necessarily chasing happiness. So for me, I think that's something that I go back and forth with still, because while I can find it in some places, and I'm very, not to be redundant, but content, with that, there are certainly other situations where I'm definitely chasing something still. So I think it's just one of those things where the older you get, the more comfortable you are with that feeling of contentment and being okay with that. All right, my last one. And it's not necessarily the piece in and of itself, but it's the story in the piece that I think stands out to me the most. So Dave Trott, if you're not familiar with Dave Trott, he's a creative director, creative consultant, marketing expert, maintains a blog that I highly recommend. We'll link to the article in the show notes. This was written a while ago, maybe about 2 years ago now, but it was something that he had reshared on his Twitter account recently, and it ties in. You'll like this, Michelle, because it ties into a film, The Producers, that obviously has gone on to great heights on Broadway and certainly in film when it was originally created. But Dave tells the story about when Mel Brooks made the film, he was told immediately that he was crazy. It was just joke after joke, laughing at Nazis and laughing at Hitler. And the studios really tried to get him to leave out much of those jokes, like Busby Berkeley and the shot of a dancing swastika and all those other things. Like, they wanted him to leave those out, and he refused. He said, point blank, and this was the line that really kind of hit me: "You don't walk up to the bell unless you're going to ring it." And the studio heads were just not having it. They were disgusted. The public isn't going to stand for it. They screened the film in Philadelphia to with no advertisement. They didn't push it. There was no audience, just 7 studio heads, and there was no laughter. The studio heads walked out in silence. They were disgusted. Mel Brooks later said that it was the worst night of his life. And it just reminds me that it could have gone south very quickly, but these are where these situations sort of come into play, I think, with creative pieces, where it's when you find your audience, when you find the right people, it can make all the difference. So he talks later about how Paul Mazursky was making a film of Peter Sellers. Seller was bored. They decided they should hold, a film club every week. Sound familiar, Michelle? That allows them to, watch a film and provide the appropriate food. And so this was the plan. So 1 week they were doing the film that they were going to see was Fellini's Vitelloni, and his wife, Mazursky's wife, was going to make spaghetti. But when the next week came, there was a mix-up. Mazursky thought his partner was going to get the film. The partner thought that Mazursky was going to bring the film, so there was no Vitelloni. So Mazursky says, well, we got the food. We got to see something. What do you have in the projection room? Nothing really, said his partner, just a can of film lying around. All right, don't worry about it. Just put it on so we've got something to watch. And that film was The Producers. No one said anything. And then they began smiling and then giggling and then falling around and screaming and laughter. And by the end of the film, Peter Sellers ran to the phone and began calling friends to let him know that he'd just seen the greatest comedy film in decades. One thing leads to another. And, Mel Brooks, becomes this true genius. All of a sudden, he's becoming the greatest comedy writer of all time. And it's just because you found the audience that you were going to find. So Dave Trott's piece basically is that ignore the people who tell you that they know what the public thinks, because they don't. Don't take them seriously. In fact, he says we're better at our jobs when we don't take anything too seriously. And if I can add something on there, it's following your belief in what got you there and what you believe strongly in, because it's about just finding that right group, the group that you intended to see, and not what someone is telling you someone's going to feel about that piece.
And what's so interesting about it is, after this small group of people saw it, it did become this, phenomenon, and the general public did come to love it. But you have to start with the people who it's for first and get them to kind of back you.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen unless I'm never going to forget that line now about don't step up to the bell unless you're going to ring it. I feel like that hits so much with me, because I feel like I can be so hesitant about doing things. Like I have lots of ideas, but I tend to not go all in on it, because I don't have the confidence that it's going to be received in the way that I want it to. But I think unless you go all in, you'll never know.
And I think too, what does it lead to on the back end? Think about all of the films then that subsequently came out, Young Frankenstein, Spaceballs, whatever. You're also given, I don't want to say you're given the benefit of the doubt, but because you did come up and you did stand true and you found your right audience, you're afforded a little bit of luxury on the back end of that, so long as you keep delivering and don't rest on your laurels. So if that's your attitude every time you come up to that bell, you're going to be in a good spot. This is a fun episode.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing this again soon.
Me too.